Hi, my name is Maggie, and my Module 4 research focused on how smell affects earthworm burrowing behavior. My research question was, do earthworms show any differences in burrowing behavior when exposed to the scent treatments of vanilla and orange citrus? To investigate this question, I set up three conditions: a control cut with damp soil and no scent, a cut with vanilla added under the soil, and a cut with orange citrus under the soil. For each trial, I placed one earthworm on the surface of the soil, started a timer, and observed whether it burrowed within 3 minutes. If it did, I recorded the time in seconds, which was 180 seconds, and if it did not burrow, I marked it as did not burrow and did not include that worm in the average time for that condition. By comparing the average burrowing time for the control, vanilla, and citrus treatments, I could determine whether the scents were attractive, repel, or had no effect on the earthworms. For my experiment, I decided to focus on smell as my test condition. After doing some reading, I learned that they use chemoreceptors on the arterial end to detect chemicals in the environment and locate food. Knowing that made me even more interested in seeing how these cues influence their movements in real time. The reason I chose orange was because we were told early in the course not to feed the worms orange peels due to the acidity. That instantly made me curious, so I wanted to see how they would behave if they were exposed to just the smell of oranges instead of actually eating them. I wanted to see if the scent alone would cause avoidance, hesitation, or a different type of movement. To balance that out, I picked vanilla for my second treatment, which it has a warm, sweet smell, which is basically the opposite of the acidic scent of orange. I thought this contrast would help me see whether the worms prefer gentler odors or if the acidity of the orange scent influences their behavior even without physical contact. For my control group, I used plain damp soil with no additives, so there was no scent added. Out of the 8 worms, 2 did not burrow even after waiting the full 3 minutes. For the 6 worms that did burrow, the average burrowing time was 188 seconds, which was the slowest average in my whole experiment. For my first test conditions, the vanilla, I had 3 worms that did not burrow even with the full 3-minute wait. For the 5 worms that did burrow, the average time was 149.2 seconds. This was noticeably faster compared to the control, which suggests that the sweet vanilla scent may have encouraged quicker burrowing. For my second test condition, which was the orange, I also had 2 worms that did not burrow after the full 3 minutes. For the worms that did burrow, the average burrowing time was 178.5 seconds. This was slower than vanilla but slightly faster than the control. Since we were told early in the course not to feed earthworms orange peels because of the acidity, I expected them to avoid the scent, and the slower times may reflect some hesitation. For my first treatment, vanilla, my hypothesis was that worms would burrow, but maybe a little hesitantly since vanilla isn't a natural soil smell. My results mostly supported this. 5 out of 8 worms burrowed, and they actually had the fastest average time of 149.2 seconds, which was quicker than the control. The 3 worms that refused to burrow matched my prediction that the unfamiliar scent could make some of them hesitant. For my second treatment, orange, I predicted that not all worms would burrow because the acidic scent might irritate them or cause avoidance, similar to what we saw earlier with the vinegar. This was also supported. 2 worms didn't burrow at all, and the ones that did had an average time of 178.5 seconds, which was lower than vanilla and closer to the control. This suggests the acidic smell caused more hesitation. Overall, both hypotheses were supported. Vanilla encouraged faster burrowing, while orange citrus led to slower and more avoided behavior. For my conclusions, I focused on whether the worms liked the scents, avoided them, or really didn't care. With vanilla, they actually seemed a little into it. The ones that burrowed did it faster than the control group, so vanilla clearly didn't bother them. It almost felt like the sweet smell made them more willing to borrow. Orange citrus was a totally different story. The scent definitely repelled him. It had the slowest borrowing time out of everything, and a couple of worms even tried to crawl up the sides instead of digging down. Since we already know oranges aren't good for them, it honestly made sense to see them react that way. What's cool is that it lines up with the article that we read. Worms are really good at sensing smells, especially natural ones that help them find food. My experiment on the opposite side, we saw how they respond to strong or irritating smells like citrus. It shows that worms use scent not just to find the good stuff, but also to avoid things that might not be great for them. If I kept going with this project, I would want to test more scents, maybe herbs, fruit, or even artificial smells to see what attracts them and what totally turns them off. It would actually be helpful for gardening or composting.